The keys to go conscious or to expand your consciousness, it's within you at any time. You have all the tools that you need. Teachers or modalities or experiences will just unlock those keys that were within you all along, and know that you are whole and complete and perfect as you are, and you have all of the wisdom within you. It's just a matter of finding the keys to show yourself that.
Zach is a podcaster, writer, cognitive dissident, yogi, and psychedelic advocate. Son of the psychedelic and consciousness pioneer Timothy Leary, Zach has had a front row seat for some of the most important cultural movements of the late 20th century. His path has taken him from digital marketing for Apple to futurist to psychedelic integration specialist. One of the most thought-provoking podcasters on cultural philosophy, Zach currently hosts the It's All Happening with Zach Leary podcast and the MAPS podcast. In this episode, we talk about the moment Zach realized what he shouldn't be doing and his journey to his work today, including how he's writing a book about psychedelic integration. You're listening to Going Conscious, the podcast where we discover new ways to live a more conscious life of fulfillment and freedom. Each week, I speak with entrepreneurs, academics, and changemakers who have made big transformations, left unfulfilling lives behind, and found meaning in this new world where purpose drives success. Let's get inspired to live our unique journeys to the fullest. Let's explore the impact we want to make and deepen our understanding of ourselves, each other, and this beautiful world around us. Live your freedom. I'm your host, Nikki Trott. In this episode, we talk about how Zach fuses his spiritual practice into his work, why challenging the fabric of our reality challenges the establishment, psychedelic integration, why you're not broken, but just out of balance, psychedelics for healing and ecology, his mentor Ram Dass, why you are complete and perfect as you are, and why the key to going conscious is within you at any time. Now let's go to our conversation. Hi, Zach. Welcome to Going Conscious.
Hi, Nikki. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to speak with you today. And I want to start by asking you, so I know that you've been in your career from working in digital marketing and strategy, which is very aligned with where I used to work as well. And then you moved into psychedelics. And of course, you had a lot in your family and in your upbringing and exposure to this topic. But I would love to find out about what spurred that change for you and what it was like for you to make that change.
Yeah, happy to share. First, I do want to clarify or kind of be specific in that I don't really overtly think that I work in psychedelics like as a label. I'm just sort of more interested in healing and kind of a wide variety of spiritual methods and healing, I guess, healing strategies and healing modalities. And psychedelics is, definitely fits into that. And sure, I guess because of my family lineage, but also just the way that the universe was sort of just pushing me, I kind of ended up formally working in that realm. But I do, I'm not attached to psychedelics being like the primary method of spiritual healing. There are many, and I'm not a zealot in that sense. But basically what happened was I spent about a little over 13 years going to an office every day, just a 9 to 5 kind of corporate person, working in digital marketing and strategy and working on some really amazing accounts, amazing clients ranging from like Apple to U2 to Coldplay and really amazing institutions and brands and creative entities. And, while I think I was pretty good at it, I wasn't as good at it as perhaps I thought I should be. And I had to question that. It was like, well, I have this amazing opportunity. And of course, the income is very good and the kind of the perks that go along with working on clients like that, and it just felt like, I don't know, just something was missing. I just felt unfulfilled. And it sounds almost cliche, but I was sitting in Ram Dass's living room at dawn one morning. Was visiting from Los Angeles and the time change was kind of in effect. So I was the first one up and I was sitting in his living room and I just had one of those moments where I I didn't realize what I should be doing, but I knew what I shouldn't be doing. And something just felt like, okay, I can't keep doing this for the rest of my life. I don't want to wake up at 75 years old going, God, what the fuck did I do? All of this time is lost. And I do want to sort of qualify that by saying, the kind of understanding and realization of what your dharma is. Like, if you feel that going to an office every day and having a great corporate career is for you, by all means, do it. It's not a bad thing at all. And I don't want to look down on that or judge people who do that. It is there are so many creative, amazing people who work in marketing and advertising. There really are. It just wasn't for me at the end of the day, and I just had to make friends with that idea. And I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't. I just knew that, okay, I want to start writing. I want to work for myself. I want to help people. I want to serve people. I want to take my spiritual practice and kind of fuse it into the world. So I think the first kind of step in that is I don't think it's clarity in terms of what you want to be doing. It's more like extricating what it is that doesn't feel right, And yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think you're so right that you get the clarity of what you shouldn't be doing before you get the clarity of what you want to be doing. And that's so scary sometimes, because there's a sense of, well, what is it then if it's not this? And I love that image of you sitting in the living room early one morning of Ram Dass and just realizing that what I'm doing is not my path. And so what steps did you take then to understand how you could fuse your spirituality into your work and follow your dharma?
That's a good question. I mean, the first step, I think the first couple steps actually were really kind of practical and pragmatic ones, sort of a knowing that I was going to be okay, that I didn't have to kind of succumb to kind of the intrinsic Western anxiety around financial insecurity. That's a big one when you go from a lucrative kind of corporate career to making your own way. That is a huge jump. A huge attraction to having a successful corporate career is that it's a very steady income modality and path, and losing that was I just had to accept that I was going to be okay and not let that cloud my judgment. So I mean, that was the first. It's just like kind of my own spiritual work. It wasn't as much of a tactical step as it was an inner step. And then the second step was I had a book idea, and that book idea, the first step was to write that down and to write an outline, and that book idea kind of morphed into podcasting. And it was really just about doing it, not listening to those voices that said, you're not good enough. There are millions of podcasts out there. There are millions of struggling authors out there. Who are you just to jump in there in your early 30s and think that you have a voice? Not listen to those voices and just be true to your own heart. Yeah.
That's interesting. You had a book idea and you wrote the outline for your book, and then that actually took you into podcasting. So why was that? Did you go into podcasting to research the topic more broadly, or to develop it in a different way? Or what took you to take that to podcasting rather than writing that book?
It turned into podcasting because I realized that I wanted to hone my storytelling abilities. I wanted to be able to externalize my ability to tell good stories and to communicate these stories with a wide variety of cultural subsets. And I thought I was good at that. I did, but writing and kind of keeping everything internalized is very different, and actually verbalizing it and turning it into an external articulation it just felt like another craft to me. So the idea of podcasting, it wasn't so much about research as it was just kind of plugging into different aspects of our culture with other people, and find that I had the ability to articulate ideas quickly, spontaneously, as podcasting requires, and to do it well.
Wow. And so now you're writing a new book called And Now the Work Begins, a manual for psychedelic integration. Is this linked, or is this a separate project?
It's kind of a newer project. It started during the summertime, I guess during the the COVID lockdown. I was in Los Angeles still, and yeah, and the idea just came to me very quickly, very coherently, and very precisely. And I wrote a 25-page outline in about a week, and I just knew I was onto something that made sense.
I love how you describe that, like it just came to you very clearly and suddenly. Can you describe that experience a bit more, and where do you think it's coming from?
If you're kind of really plugged into the psychedelic world, I mean, this is a kind of a convoluted answer, but or I should say, the way that I was plugged into the psychedelic world, I was kind of more of like a commentator and kind of a real-time psychedelic cultural anthropologist, and just philosophizing and commenting on the new psychedelic renaissance and where it was at, and the people and the players in it, and all the different research that was happening. But that really just I almost felt like I was a psychedelic news anchor in a way. It had a lot to do with, I was the host of the MAPS podcast, and I was going around the world giving a lot of talks on psychedelics. But I sort of felt, yeah, like I was a psychedelic news anchor, and that didn't really feel all that original to me. It felt like I was kind of on the bubble of the community and watching everything that was going on, sort of on the rim of it. And for a while, I was like, okay, well, what do I have to contribute here, other than just commenting on what other people are doing? What do I have to contribute? And the idea of integration, specifically in developing a model and a protocol for psychedelic integration, felt like a missing piece of the puzzle. Nobody's really done it in a way that I find that has clarity to it and has an actual working methodology for the world or for people to follow. So that was my idea, and I just listened to it and was like, oh, okay, this needs to be done.
Wow. So, can you tell us more about psychedelic integration and what that means?
Yeah, in the modern, I mean, the whole psychedelic revolution has many phases to it. Starting, of course, with the '60s, actually starting a little bit before in the '50s, when it was LSD. Psychotherapy was in a very clinical and kind of dry psychotherapeutic setting. Then it moved into the '60s, where the cultural phenomenon was kind of attached to it, and then into the '80s, '90s, and now, when therapeutic research and all of these amazing kind of applications for very specific issues have taken a foothold, and the research and the efficacy shows that this is a serious modality in science that can't be ignored. But within all of that, I sort of felt like the cognitive liberty discussion was being lost. Like, psychedelic research and psychedelic therapy is an amazing thing, but we can't lose sight that there are millions and millions of people across the globe who will still take this as a kind of a spiritual quest, as a as an inspirational part of their search for deeper meaning within themselves. And that's what cognitive liberty is about. It's about having the right to change your own consciousness as you see fit. And I think so much of the psychedelic experience is attached to the journey itself. It's like what happens during the journey. And that, of course, for many people, it's a life-changing experience. But I started to become more concerned with what you do after the journey. Okay, you have your consciousness changed. You're able to see yourself in a different way. You're able to see your place in reality in a different way. And you're able to see reality itself in a different way. But then what? Then what do you do? How do you make these changes last? How do you make, this new kind of perception of yourself and your behavior and your emotions? How do you make that last so it can become a daily part of your life? And I think that's what integration is about. It's about taking those moments and being able to develop a spiritual awareness where you can extract those moments and apply them and take them with you for years to come.
Yes.
I mean, the idea is like, The classic example is like when before Ram Dass went to India in the 70s, in the 60s, in 1967, he was really hung up on the idea that LSD and other psychedelics, like you go up and you come down, you go up and you come down. And he could never reconcile with the idea that you always have to come down. And then when he went to India and met, his guru, but also discovered a new map for consciousness, he realized that you don't have to come down in such a dramatic way. And that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, so helping people to really integrate the spiritual experiences that they have with the help of psychedelics into their lives as a whole, so that they can develop and bring all of those learnings into everything that they do to underpin their life, business, relationships, existence.
All of it, all of it, absolutely. And to help you kind of distill what may seem so foreign and spectacular and otherworldly during the psychedelic experience, because it can be pretty out there and pretty disorienting, but kind of distilling that into language and into ideas that are applicable for your daily life in a holistic way.
And what are some of the things, or one example of something that people can do to bring that integration to life?
Well, it starts with being very clear about your intentions and writing them down. So I'm a big proponent of writing things down before, you're going into a psychedelic journey with a very specific set of intentions, not with just a catch-all kind of, I want to change all of my life, period, kind of distilling it to a very workable set of intentions. Like, I want to find more fulfillment within my work. I want to improve my intimate relationships. I want to not fall into the hands of depression so often, whatever it may be for the individual. Writing those things down, taking them into the psychedelic journey, inviting them in, observing them very, very carefully, and then when you're done with the psychedelic journey, kind of juxtaposing what it is you experience during the psychedelic journey in regards to your intentions, and then developing that into, for instance, a meditation practice is a really valuable tool for the 5 to 7 days following a psychedelic journey, taking those written realizations into your meditation practice. I mean, it's one example of an integration methodology that I think works very, very well.
Yeah. So really having a very clear intention and knowing why you're going into that experience, and then setting yourself up to bring that through into your life afterwards.
And recognizing it and being
Mm.
able to, make friends with it in a language that works for you, and that includes being honest about about the aspects of the psychedelic journey that may have been challenging. I certainly know when I go into kind of a higher dosage psychedelic journey, I will see parts of myself and areas that I struggle with, that I've struggled with throughout my life. I have kind of specific issues that have been difficult for me, and being able to look at those honestly and with kind of a loving but brutal honesty of like looking at your shadow side and saying, okay, this is what's happened. This is what I tend to do in a certain situation, and how can I fix that?
Mm. And as psychedelics are becoming more recognized and appreciated for what they can do for our mental health and spiritual growth as a whole, how do you see them being able to change our culture, our society, our world in the future?
Well, I mean, that is it's I think it's a kind of a phased sort of process. I mean, one, like you said, we are now seeing psychedelics being accepted as a very safe and effective psychotherapeutic method, and that's great. Institutions from Johns Hopkins to NYU to the Imperial College of London, all of these amazing institutions now are recognizing psychedelics as a core methodology, and that is the first step. And I think the big thing is for people who have had their lives and their overall well-being and kind of holistic balance changed by psychedelics, to not be afraid to talk about it, to come out of the closet and share it with others, and integrate themselves into the world around us. I'm not a zealot in the sense that I think that, you know, uh, everybody in the world should turn on with psychedelics, because that's probably not going to happen. But for the people that do and the people that have, I do think it's really important that they talk about it. So this healing and this sense of community can really be absorbed within the world around us. I mean, I think everybody who has had a lot of psychedelic experience will agree that, the sense of oneness, the sense of togetherness, the sense of kind of universal connection that they feel while on psychedelics is amplified to a great deal. And you start feeling less separation. You start feeling less disconnection from, all of your brothers and sisters around you, even if they're on the polar ends of the extreme. And psychedelics are a great way to bridge that gap a little bit and find more commonality and find that we do have more in common than we don't.
If you enjoy Going Conscious, please subscribe for a new episode every Wednesday. If you think your friends and networks would benefit from listening, please share this podcast of fulfillment and freedom with them. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. It's great to read what you think, and your support makes a big difference. Together, let's grow our courage and tools to transform and live the lives we really want to. As well as creating Going Conscious, I work as a transformation coach and conscious brand consultant. I'm on a mission to help holistically maximize conscious entrepreneurs to drive positive changes for themselves, others, and the planet. I can help you to transition and level up personally, and I can help your brand grow and make a bigger impact. To connect with me and find out more about how we can work together, find me on Instagram @NikkiTrott or on my website, nikkitrott.com. Please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you, and let's talk about your path of growth and development. Psychedelics are a taboo still, and beyond them still being considered as illegal drugs by lots of people, what are the other reasons you think that psychedelics are a taboo topic that people don't talk about, even when they've had life-changing, opening experiences which have really helped them to develop?
It's a great question. It's a great question. It's one that I'm not even sure I completely know the answer to. I think it has so much to do with the cultural implications of that we're still, like it or not, we're all subject to our cultural programming. Almost 60 years now, psychedelics have sort of been part of, what was called a subculture, and sort of like, the others, they do psychedelics, and it's a subculture thing. So it kind of automatically keeps you ghettoized and into like this secret underground world. And I think language has a large part to do with that, in the sense that, yes, psychedelic medicines are drugs, but what is a drug? What is a healthy drug? What is a destructive drug? What is a highly vibrational drug? What is a low vibrational drug? Kind of extrapolating that language and making it into, a way that works for everybody, so it doesn't have so much stigma and taboo around it. But I mean, Nikki, I don't really know the answer to that question. I just know that, here we are 60 years later after the beginning of the first psychedelic movement. We see all of the various pitfalls that have happened along the way, and it's up to us to how to get over it and release the stigma, as it was.
Yeah, absolutely. I just find it so fascinating because I'm from London and lived in New York and Berlin, and I've been in, the techno club scene, and I've been surrounded by drugs. And I'm one of the only people I know who just never took any drugs. I drank alcohol consistently until I stopped completely a couple of years ago, but that was just a totally normal part of life. And so were many, many other drugs. And for me, I saw them as kind of negative and destructive, and I had no interest in them, which is just my experience, right? I definitely can't say that that's a blanket truth, but that was where I came from. And I was 29, going through my Saturn return, making huge changes in my life, experiencing my spiritual awakening when I first took LSD. And it was just obvious to me that that was something that would be very productive and helpful for me. And I've had many psychedelic experiences since regularly. And it's just been interesting when I've talked about this with some of my friends from London and people who are not in that mindset, that there's a lot of fear around psychedelics. And I find it really interesting because for me, the other drugs make me feel a bit fearful. Like, you don't know what it is, even what's even in that, who has suffered for you to hold that in your hands. You know, like there's this whole thing of the cocaine vegan. It's kind of like, I mean, where does that come from? How many people have died or been affected very violently for that to be here? You know, and then when I think about where this fear comes from, this is purely my own speculation and it's small investigation, but what comes back to me is a sense of the fear that we seem to have of going into ourselves, and this terror of just being really with ourselves and looking at all of the stuff. It's the same fear that, you know, I did a Vipassana meditation course, and the kind of 10 days of silence and inward experience, I found absolutely incredible, one of the most incredible things I've ever done. But when I spoke to people about that, I thought I noticed the same kind of fear of what are you going to find in there? And I find that really fascinating because there are shadows that everybody needs to work through, but by not looking at them, it doesn't mean they're not there.
Right, exactly. That was all well said. You know, I mean, any idea, theory, spiritual practice, modality, anything like that which challenges the fabric of our reality is threatening to the collective consciousness. It just is. It's threatening to the establishment because, you know, the idea that this reality that we've all agreed upon, that we call reality, when you suggest that, well, what is reality? And maybe this isn't even it. You know, that idea alone is so threatening to the powers that be because it gives, and the powers that be include ourselves. It's not an us or them thing or a they thing. It's threatening to ourselves because it allows the idea for you to challenge the status quo. It allows for the idea to challenge the norm, to challenge what we consider our everyday waking realities. And when you invite in not normal waking states of reality, it's a utopian vision that a lot of people find very scary, you know. And I think that is why mysticism as a whole has become so put on the back burner into the modern world, you know. The industrial age and this technocratic revolution. And I'm a huge technologist. I'm not anti-technology at all, but the idea of like this technocratic industrial way that mankind has found itself in, that can't be disrupted. And if that is disrupted, oh my gosh, everything is going to fall apart. And I think that's where psychedelics become very threatening.
Yes. And I often find myself wondering whether this awakening, which appears to be happening now, in part with the help of psychedelics, and this sense of going back to the present moment, going back to connection with understanding oneness, I wonder if this is really a going back or if it's a going forward, and if indeed we needed to go through this technological revolution to position ourselves to then be able to really make strides forward spiritually. I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one because have you heard of the book, Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker?
No, but I'm writing it down.
It's a really good one. It's very, very wordy, very, very hard to get through. He's a neuroscientist, but he's also a cultural anthropologist who basically his supposition is that, much to most people's surprise, we are living in the most peaceful time
Yes.
in our existence right now. You may not think that because media takes every event that happens, you know, violent, negative uprising that happens and puts it on blast 24/7, and you think the world is on fire. Oh my God, chaos, chaos, chaos. But, you know, like a man of my age, a man in his mid 40s, like, you know, in the year 1500, the most common form of death in the year 1500 for a man like me, it wasn't disease or famine or poverty. It was violence. It was dying at the hands of violence. Your village would have been raped and pillaged. Your farm would have been raped and pillaged by people coming around to basically slaughter you and take your belongings. That was the status quo for that age. It wasn't just wars. We lived in an incredibly violent time. So, and in some ways, like day-to-day violence is, it's at its lowest. So, the reason I bring that up is because, just to make the point is that we have been living with conflict, religious fanaticism, oligarchies, basically trying to control the masses since the beginning of civilized mankind. So when we do bring up that idea of going back, that can be debated, ad nauseum. We can talk about that a lot because there are some parts we don't want to go back to. So I think it's a little bit of, yes, there's been so much like indigenous culture, ancient mysticism, kind of tribal rites of passage that were part of every culture and subculture in the past, kind of taking that and fusing that into our new found highly evolutionized society now, and kind of creating a new utopian vision for the future that includes mysticism, that also includes technology. It's not about shunning technology. I mean, technology has a wonderful, wonderful place in the world, like what we're doing now. It's an amazing thing. And taking, psychedelic awareness and spiritual heart-centeredness and kind of fusing that into a new vision. So I don't really think it's just about a return to something or creating a new something. I think it's a fusion of the two, really figuring it out as we go along.
Yes, I love that. I absolutely love that. Really well put. And that's something I think about a lot as well, about where we've come from. Also in my choice to follow a vegan diet, that's something that I also think about in relation to the violence of the past, when thinking about how we've integrated, our development spiritually, our understanding of the world around us, of our experiences of suffering, because like you say, it was completely normal that you would die at the hands of violence in the 1500s, and now that would be shocking. And for me, I think that's really fascinating, because I don't know how I could kill anyone or anything. Yet that
Right.
would be very, very important for my survival if I was born in a different time. And okay, if it really was my survival, maybe I could do it. I don't know, but what does that mean for us as humankind? How we're moving away from the sense of inflicting suffering, and hopefully that is a symbol of how we are raising collectively out of suffering in some way.
Well, you're British. Do you know why the British Empire drives on the right-hand side of the road? Do you know the roots of that?
Because of the sword, so that the sword was held in the
That's
right
right.
hand.
In the right hand, yeah. Right. So many British people actually don't know the roots of
Yeah.
that. It goes back to medieval roots.
But I don't understand why everyone else doesn't, because that makes sense to me.
I know it's
the left side
funny.
is the right side.
It's so funny. I mean, horse and carriages going down.
Yeah.
If you had to protect your crop.
Yeah.
So you can have your sword. I know, it's wild.
Yeah, it is wild. There's something else I wanted to ask you, Zach. So, I mean, also for listeners who maybe aren't so familiar with how incredibly powerful psychedelics have been found for therapy, for mental health, it would be really great to hear just a very short summary of kind of what their potential is. But as a second part of that, I also wanted to ask you something I've been pondering on myself recently around what are the opportunities from psychedelics for how we can improve our environment and our natural world as well? Because I definitely think they come hand in hand, that when we feel better in ourselves, we feel more connected, and therefore we treat the world with the love that we want to receive. And so I definitely don't think they can be separated. But the incredible natural experiences that people have through psychedelics, I think, also open up a completely new understanding of how we are connected, how we are the same. And I feel that the conversation is much more around the human mental health than the kind of ecological side. So would love to hear your thoughts on those two questions.
Well, regarding the ecological side, I don't know about you, but I certainly, when you are having a revelatory psychedelic experience, you're able to see behaviors within yourself and within your community. And by community, I mean your fellow mankind, you're able to see these behaviors as, well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's completely
Yeah.
insane. Why are we doing this? It literally makes no sense other than it feeds our base instincts of like greed and colonization and things like that. And the environmental movement is at the forefront of that. It's like, wow, why are we destroying our ability to survive? Because that's really what it is. It's like the old George Carlin, the famous American comedian in the 80s and 90s. He used to do this great rap about this great bit in his comedy routine about the environmental movement, about it's not about saving the planet. The planet is going to be just fine. It will shake us off like a bad case of fleas. It's about saving our ability to live on this planet. And why are we putting that at such risk, And we do that because all we can see is short-term gain and not long-term sustainability. We don't think about everyone else who's going to come after us. Think, well, okay, the big massive destruction that's going to come in this whole apocalyptic environmental doomsday scenario. Well, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. Fuck it. What do I care? Give me more, 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 more. Doesn't matter. And we tend to, instill that as a basic principle. Like, it's not our problem; it's going to be someone else's problem, and that's a really sad reality. That's a really sad way of looking at our at our destiny and at just classic existential issues. Why are we here? What's our purpose for being here? And if we look at it so short term, yeah, it's pretty difficult. And yeah, what was the first part? I took the second part.
Yeah, sorry, asking two questions at once. So the other part was just if you could summarize briefly
Oh,
the
yeah.
power that psychedelics have to help our mental health, just for anyone who might not be well versed in the
Yeah,
topic.
absolutely. Well, one, the idea of healing, of mental health therapies, of the overall kind of therapeutic, I guess, solutions and conditioning to alleviate mental health suffering. It's a very, very, very new field. But up until just over 100 years ago, a lot of the mental health disorders that we see today, the only solution was to put you in a sanitarium, lock the door, and call it a day. That was the only solution. There was no medicine. The idea of cognitive behavioral therapy wasn't even a thing until Freud and Jung came around. So these are very, very new sciences. And the sciences thus far, I certainly think there's a lot of value to cognitive psychotherapy, to talk therapy. It can be very, very helpful. There is some value. I'm not completely anti-science in the sense that I don't think all mental health medications are bad. They're horrifically overprescribed to a very detrimental level. No question about that. But some people do have a biochemical tick within them that medication can help fix. But long story short is that all of these mental health kind of therapeutic modalities thus far, the efficacy is pretty shoddy. We have no idea really. We're just starting to make a little bit of inroads and progress in how to heal these deep traumas that have created our interpersonal and personal conditions, and the idea that we have a solution is completely ridiculous because we don't, and B, the idea that psychedelics are a threat to those healing modalities is also kind of insane because um, you know psychedelics have been used for thousands of years for a wide variety of spiritual and mystical applications, but also for kind of day-to-day spiritual well-being. We certainly don't have the data that show us how indigenous cultures were looking at the mental health issues of their time, but we do know that a lot of their intentions behind using them was to kind of keep balance and to keep sort of the social constructs kind of in check and to keep the integrity of our communities in place, and that's why psychedelics were being used. And that's the power that they have with mental health issues, is that they create a way for the individual to pinpoint what it is that they feel causes them imbalance. Nothing is wrong with you. I mean, that's the first thing. It's like, if you have a mental health condition, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're just out of balance in a certain way, in a very specific kind of part physiological, part psychic, part spiritual, part social way that causes you to feel a little disease, a little unease within the world. And psychedelics offer you a new way to look at those conditions and give you new tools to perhaps add a little bit more balance to your life. And that's, if you look at all the great studies, for people who are listening who aren't as familiar with the MAPS, MDMA PTSD trials, or the Johns Hopkins Divinity trials with psilocybin, or the NYU, New York University end of life psilocybin clinical trials, and all of these amazing studies that have gone on within the last 10 years, you can see that they're all balance recalibration. They all show the individual ways at which they don't have to let the pendulum swing so far to one direction, and kind of keep it more within a workable frame of mind.
Yes. Amazing. And Zach, you mentioned how Ram Dass was your mentor, a family friend, someone who you spend a lot of time with. And
Yes.
I know that you're not just a psychedelic advocate, you're a spiritualist. And so I have to ask you, what's the most memorable thing that Ram Dass said to you?
The most memorable thing. Well, probably, I've kind of told this story a few times, but I'll tell it again because it's a good story.
Please.
In Let's see, it was the spring of 1996. Ram Dass was visiting our house, and he was visiting my dad. My dad was sick, dying of cancer, and he knew it was going to be his last physical visit with him. And they were visiting with each other, and I was in the room, and I left them just to kind of hang out and visit. And right outside of my dad's kind of sliding glass door that went onto the lawn was a flotation tank, an isolation tank, or float tank, as people call it today. And while they were visiting, I went inside of the float tank, and I took a mild psychedelic. And I went inside of the tank, and Ram Dass and my dad didn't know I was inside of the tank. And they decided to go out to the lawn and get outside of his bedroom. And they pulled up two chairs overlooking the lawn. And the two chairs happened to be right next to the float tank, like 2 or 3 feet away, very, very close. And they didn't know I was inside. And I didn't know that I was going to find out we're right outside of the tank. And I was inside of the tank for a good hour, and things were starting to get pretty squirrely. I was getting into a bit of a wormhole inside of the tank on a mild psychedelic, and I needed to get out. And had a mild but beautiful panic inside of the tank, and I pushed open the hatch door of the tank and got myself out. And then I poked my head out, and then I saw them about 2 feet away from me sitting there. And we all startled each other completely. And we're all just looking at each other in silence. I had sweat pouring down my face. Ram Dass and my dad were just looking at me in silence, didn't know I was in there. And there was, 10 seconds of silence that felt like 10 years of silence. And then Ram Dass just got about 12 inches away from my face, leaned in, looked in my eyes, and said, "Who are you now? Who are you now?" And what can I say? That was just one of those moments that altered my life for the rest of time.
Wow.
Who are you now? And I shared that story with him many, many times, again, in the preceding 25 years since that happened. And he loved it. I loved it. We really riffed on that idea of who are you now, and the idea that you can reinvent your present condition anytime you want, and look at yourself and take spiritual inquiry and take appropriate remedies at any point. You're never stuck. Your stuckness is up to you. That's the implication there. Your stuckness is up to you. You can reinvent yourself and create your optimal self at any time. Who are you now? It's a beautiful, beautiful mantra, and it was a beautiful, profound moment. And I was a 22-year-old kid still finding his way in the world, and it shook me to my very foundation.
I love that. It's so freeing and empowering. Thank you for sharing it. Really beautiful story. And Zach, as we come to the end of our time together today, I wanted to ask you, what does personal success look like to you now? And how has this changed since your days in the digital marketing and strategy world?
Well, it's a good question. There's something that Tony Robbins has done in recent years that I will use to answer this question. And why Tony Robbins has done it, I think he's certainly become more mystical and spiritual in his later years. Why? Who knows? But anyway, he's changed a lot of his language from accomplishment to fulfillment. They're two very different things, and kind of the old school Tony Robbins kind of modalities and all those events he used to do was very much about accomplishment. How can you go out there and accomplish and make money and create business and jobs and go out there and accomplish more and more and more? And he changed the language to fulfillment, and they're two very, very different things. And point being is you can find fulfillment and contentness no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are in your life. And the idea that you have to be somewhere else in your life and you have to be at a higher level or create more or kind of rise up this ladder is a recipe for disaster, because that creates suffering. It creates lack of ease, of comfort, and acceptance of being present and loving in this moment. You can find fulfillment no matter where you are or what you're doing. So that's how I measure success. It's about taking your present condition and finding fulfillment in it.
Beautiful. I love that. It reminds me, your description of the evolution of Tony Robbins' language reminds me of how Wayne Dyer talks about that shift to the meaning phase of life and how that's something that we all find at some point.
Yes. We all find if we're lucky.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. If we're doing the work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If we're open to finding it, maybe.
If we're open. Yes.
Yeah. Wow, amazing. And is there a key takeaway or message that you would like to leave us with?
I think that was pretty much it. I think, the title of this podcast is the Going Conscious Podcast. And I think, the message I would just leave anybody with is that the keys to go conscious or to expand your consciousness, it's within you at any time. You have all the tools that you need. Teachers or modalities or experiences will just unlock those keys that were within you all along, and know that you are whole and complete and perfect as you are, and you have all of the wisdom within you. It's just a matter of finding the keys to show yourself that.
I love that. Amazing. Thank you. And is there a book that you have read recently or that's had a big impact on your life that you'd like to recommend to us?
Oh, well, I'll tell you this. I've reread an older book called The Filter Bubble. It was written by Eli Parsier, who was one of the founders of Move On, who prophesized the idea of filter bubbles within technology. And he did this, 12, 13, 14 years ago, and the premise being how technology, and specifically like the algorithm that collects our data on Google, social media, et cetera, basically takes this algorithmic personalization of yourself and creates a profile that gives you a version of your digital reality that is specific to you. And at first, while that seemed well-intentioned, what it's done is created these filter bubbles that have isolated us more, and has created these levels of discourse that cause us to stay within these filter bubbles rather than finding the middle ground. All you get is extremism on both the right and the left. It's called The Filter Bubble. Eli Parsier, highly prophetic book written a while ago, but he really saw all of the problems that we are finding ourselves in now. And he saw them and was able to say, hey, watch out for this.
Amazing. That sounds like an incredible read. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And lastly, Zach, where can listeners find you and your work online?
They could find me at zachleary.net or my Instagram, either one.
And the name of your podcast as well, just to remind everybody.
It's All Happening and the Maps podcast.
Yes, amazing. Thank you so much. I've loved speaking with you today. Thank you for your time, Zach.
Thank you, Nikki.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Zach. He mentioned how people don't talk about the incredible benefits of psychedelics enough because they're still a taboo subject. So I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to have this discussion with him and applaud him for the work that he is doing to raise awareness and understanding. I loved hearing about Zach's story with Ram Dass and can only imagine how inspiring it must be to be so close to such an impactful spiritual leader. One of many Ram Dass quotes which I love is, "The quieter you become, the more you can hear." Zach's closing remarks about how we all have the wisdom and key to going conscious within us already was a very important reminder. Sometimes we need to stop looking around us for answers and instead look within. What does your intuition say? What do you have right there in this moment? As Zach said, you are already complete. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe now. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star rating and short review. If you think people you know might benefit from listening to Going Conscious, please share it with them. I know I get much of my inspiration from podcasts which are shared with me. For all episodes, our library and more, visit goingconscious.com. Your support to spread this positive message of fulfillment and freedom means so much. As well as hosting Going Conscious, I help conscious entrepreneurs to transition and unleash their power and purpose with my transformation coaching and conscious brand consulting work. Discover more on Instagram at Nikki Trott or on my website, nikkitrott.com. I'd love to hear from you and to talk about your goals, questions, or how we can work together. And if I don't hear from you before then, see you next Wednesday on the next episode of Going Conscious. As always, live your freedom.